staged, like the set of a TV commercial where nothing real ever happens. I work from the garage building breakaway props and rigging-controlled explosions for movies. It's precise work, quiet work. I liked the silence here. For the first month, everything was perfect. Neighbors waved with that overly tight smile. No one asked questions, and no one lingered. The Homeowners Association had a laminated binder for everything from grass height to acceptable mailbox fonts. It was obsessive. But I figured, hey, that's suburbia for you. Then, one morning, my brand new mailbox was bent in half like a failed origami experiment. No note, no knock, just silence. And that was the first crack in the perfect picture. I stood over the wreckage, still in my slippers. My new mailbox crushed, twisted, torn clean off the post. A black paint smear streaked across the metal. Maybe it was a teenager joyriding. Maybe someone texting and swerved. Things like that happen right. I spent the afternoon at the hardware store picking out a sturdier model. Double-thick aluminum-reinforced base, fresh concrete. I even added little brass numbers like my grandma used to polish every Sunday. By sunset, it stood tall again, perfectly aligned, proud, maybe too proud. 30 minutes later, she showed up. Victoria Harlow. Pressed blazer clipboard in hand, a smile that didn't blink. She called the accident unusual, asked if I had guests often, and reminded me that some residents adapt faster than others. It didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like an evaluation. And for some reason, that smile chilled me more than the wind. 2 weeks later, same day, same time, 5:58 a.m. Another bang, another shredded mailbox. Same deep tire mark on the curb, same black paint smudge. I ran to the window just in time to see the back of a black SUV disappearing around the corner. My second brand-new mailbox lay crumpled like foil in the dew-soaked grass. Twisted, clean. No other damage, no skid marks, no apology. This wasn't random. Still, I told myself it had to be coincidence. A delivery truck. A sleep-deprived neighbor, but that SUV, it moved too smoothly, almost like it knew exactly where to hit. So I replaced the mailbox again. Only this time I mounted a small motion camera on the front porch. Not to spy, just to catch whatever was happening just in case. But part of me already knew this wasn't carelessness, it was precision. She came back the next morning. No warning, no apology. Just that clipboard, that pinched smile, and a copy of the HOA regulation booklet as thick as a brick. Victoria stood on my front porch like she lived there, gold HOA badge catching the morning light. She pointed to the small camera I'd installed and asked, "Did you file an installation request with the association?" I said it was for my property's protection. She tilted her head, made a little tisk sound, then handed me a printed rule. Section 4.2. No private surveillance facing community pathways. "I'm sure you understand," she said sweetly. "Privacy is important in our community." Her voice was polite. Her tone was poison. And as she walked away, I realized something. She didn't care about the rules. She was the rules. Third time. It was a cold October morning. I was ready. 5:58 a.m. Just like clockwork. I stood behind the curtain, coffee in hand, eyes on the street. The black SUV slowed down, lined up with the mailbox, then accelerated. The impact shook the pavement. Metal tore like paper. The mailbox flipped. And for the first time, I saw the license plate, clear as daylight. A perfect match to the car parked in Victoria Harlow's driveway. I didn't feel shock. I felt clarity, like someone had finally turned the volume up on a silent scream. I reviewed the footage, 3 camera angles, license plate, vehicle, timing, intent. No guesswork left. This wasn't a reckless neighbor. It was targeted, personal. The woman who enforced the rules was breaking them repeatedly, and she thought no one could touch her. She was about to find out how wrong she was. I couldn't stop replaying it, the moment in our first conversation when Victoria asked if I was single. I had thought it was small talk. She'd mentioned a local coffee shop, suggested we get to know each other better. I'd smiled politely, said I was focused on work and still settling in. Her smile stayed, but something behind her eyes went cold. It was fast. A flicker. Then she blinked, reset, and changed the subject. But now, after 3 mailbox attacks, the rulebook warfare, and the surveillance warnings, it all clicked. This wasn't about mailboxes. It was about control, about rejection. I didn't give her what she wanted: attention, obedience, submission. So she decided to take everything she could. 3 conversations, 3 mailboxes, a message loud and clear. Comply or be crushed. She picked the wrong guy. 30 minutes after the impact, she arrived. Victoria stepped out of her SUV like she hadn't just crushed my property again. No Derek this time. No apology. Just that same clipboard, same cold smile. She circled the broken mailbox like an art critic evaluating a controversial sculpture. These things always seem to happen. Only to yours, she said, casually snapping photos. I reminded her that the mailbox had stood in that same spot for 30 years without issue. She shrugged. Sometimes change brings unforeseen consequences. Then she walked away. No concern, no denial, just a vague threat carefully wrapped in HOA language. She wasn't just trying to annoy me, she was documenting the wreckage, cataloging it like it was part of a case she was building. Except, I wasn't the criminal in this story. I was the target. And I was done being quiet. That night I sat alone in my garage workshop. Around me, tools, bolts, gears. And 3 mangled mailboxes piled like casualties of a war I hadn't started. For years I'd built fake walls to collapse on cue car hoods that shattered safely windows that exploded without a scratch. But we also build the opposite props that look fragile, delicate, but are engineered to survive fire impact explosions. I stared at a black paint chip I'd found embedded in the last mailbox. It matched her SUV perfectly. Victoria Harlow wanted a game of demolition derby fine. But I wasn't building a mailbox this time. I was building a lesson. Steel core. Deep foundation, a facade of vulnerability masking engineered retribution. She wanted destruction. She was about to get something that hits back. Monday, 5:58 a.m. I'd be ready. I opened my laptop and pulled out the drafting paper. This wasn't going to be a simple post and box. This would be a fortress hidden in plain sight. Steel core frame, mounted on a 4-foot-deep concrete anchor. Exterior aluminum shell to match HOA regulations, perfectly height, color shape. No detail left to chance. This was Hollywood-grade engineering camouflaged as suburban compliance. Legal, precise, indestructible. I scheduled material deliveries during Victoria's known errand windows. Worked in sections pouring concrete at night, welding in the garage during HOA-approved hours. To neighbors, it looked like I was finally giving in. To Victoria, probably just another victory. But every bolt I tightened, every layer I disguised brought me closer to impact. Because this wasn't just revenge. It was documentation. It was justice. Engineered. And when Monday came, the laws of physics were going to say what no HOA bylaw could. Tuesday morning, a yellow paper was taped to my front door. Violation: grass height exceeds HOA limit, measured 3.2 inches. Fine, $70. I pulled out a ruler. My lawn was identical to every other on the block. Wednesday, another yellow notice. Paint color deviation. White tone, not HOA approved. Fine, $150. Thursday, excessive tool usage during quiet hours. Except I hadn't turned on a power tool in 2 days. The pattern was clear. Victoria had switched tactics. She wasn't hiding behind her SUV anymore. She was coming at me through bureaucracy. Weaponized regulations, false violations, and each one perfectly timed to stack pressure, tighten the noose. Neighbors stopped making eye contact. I could feel the space around me shrinking like the air was thinner near my house. And Victoria, she hadn't knocked. She didn't need to anymore. Her rules were doing the talking. That afternoon, Betty Chambers knocked on my door, 72 years old. Lived next door since the 80s. She held a plate of cookies in one hand and a manila folder in the other. "I've been waiting for someone like you," she said softly. Inside the folder, photos violation notices timelines. 3 families, the Johnsons, the Rodriguezes, the Millers, all gone within 2 years of Victoria becoming HOA president. Same pattern, minor infractions, fines, warnings, then the pressure, then foreclosure. "She finds something wrong with you," Betty whispered, "and she won't stop until you leave." Her voice cracked when she showed me a $300 fine for flying a U.S. flag slightly too high. Victoria wasn't just enforcing rules, she was testing people. If you didn't bow, you broke. But I wasn't bowing. And this time someone was taking notes on her. By the end of the second week, my front door looked like a bulletin board for a crime spree. 5 yellow violation slips stacked taped screaming for attention. Illegal grass height. Unregistered mailbox height adjustment. Suspicious tool storage. Overly assertive parking angle. Failure to comply with community aesthetic harmony. Each fine steeper than the last. Neighbors walked past my house faster now, eyes down. Not because they hated me, because they feared becoming me. This was psychological warfare. Slow, methodical, designed to isolate and exhaust. And it was working until I started treating it like what it really was, a script. A villain with a pattern, a system with cracks. I wasn't just being punished. I was being baited, provoked, pushed toward a collapse she could file under non-compliance. But if she wanted a collapse, I'd give her something that hit the ground a lot harder. My first strike wasn't loud. It was a sign. Plain white. HOA font. Neatly printed area under HOA surveillance. Authorized equipment in use. No threats, no sarcasm, just technically accurate. I installed it in my yard exactly 12 inches from the sidewalk per regulation. By noon, Derek Moss was at my door, sweating. "This violates signage policy section 5.3, he mumbled, handing me a $500 fine. "Really?" I asked, flipping open the HOA book I'd already memorized. "Because this looks pretty compliant." He looked nervous, then terrified when Victoria called me directly that night. "Sweetie," she said, voice dipped in venom. "You think you're clever, but you're playing a dangerous game." I smiled into the phone. "No, Victoria. I'm following the rules. Better than you ever did." She hung up, and I marked the spot, 1 tripwire laid. 29 to go. Thursday morning, I looked out the window and froze. Victoria was in my grandparents' memorial garden. Tape measure in one hand, clipboard in the other. Derek followed behind her like a scolded puppy. She walked straight through the flower beds, deliberately. Her designer heels crushed rose stems my grandmother had planted 30 years ago. She nudged a memorial stone with her toe, then kicked it aside. "These plantings violate setback zone regulations," she declared flatly. "Emergency vehicles could be impeded." I ran outside. My voice shook. "This garden's been here for 3 decades. She didn't blink. History doesn't override safety. Remove it within 72 hours. I looked down at the crushed daffodils. The soil still held my grandfather's footsteps. And now her footprints were on top of his. She hadn't just crossed a line. She erased one. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the window watching the ruins of what used to be home. Roses torn. Memorial stones toppled. A lifetime of Sunday mornings, flattened by a woman with a clipboard. I opened a drawer in the hallway searching for something, anything, and there it was, Grandpa's old gardening journal. Faded leather, dirt under the spine. I hadn't touched it since his funeral. Inside, on a dog-eared page, I found a note in his handwriting. "We don't plant roses for today. We plant them so someone else can sit in the shade tomorrow. I closed the book. My hands stopped shaking. This wasn't about winning anymore. This was about protecting something bigger than myself. Victoria wanted to wipe out legacy fine. She was about to learn what legacy does when you try to bury it. By sunrise, I was in my garage. Blueprints spread across the workbench. Steel frame measurements. Impact resistance models. Angles, timelines, camera coverage zones. This wasn't just a mailbox anymore. It was an operation. Victoria had broken things meant to bring peace. Now I'd build something that delivered consequence. I ordered industrial-grade concrete. Scheduled late-night pours during HOA-approved quiet hours. Rigged backup power supplies. Cloud-based storage. Even Betty offered her front window for an extra camera angle. She'd waited 2 years for someone to fight back. I wasn't fighting just for me now. I was fighting for the Johnsons, the Rodriguezes, the Millers, for every neighbor too scared to speak. I wasn't building a trap out of spite. I was building a reminder that some things may look like mailboxes, but hit back like justice. By midweek, she changed tactics. No more subtlety. Victoria now parked her black SUV directly across the street engine off sunglasses on. She sat for 20 minutes at a time watching, sometimes binoculars in hand, sometimes pretending to scroll her phone while the lens peeked between window slats. Every material delivery, she noted the timestamp. Every tool I used. She took photos. Good. Let her watch. Let her think I was finally folding under pressure. I even left fake sketches in plain sight designs for mailbox colors I'd submit for approval. But beneath the surface, the real build was already buried, anchored, reinforced, invisible. She thought this was still about a rule book. She didn't realize she was circling a battlefield, and the ground under her wheels wasn't as soft as it used to be. The mailbox was finished, but I wasn't done. This had to be bulletproof not just in steel, but in evidence. I installed 6 cameras hidden in Birdhouse's porch lights, even Betty's attic vent, each fed to encrypted cloud backups time-synced to the second. Motion triggers. Calibrated. Audio pickup. Directional mics. 1 angle wide. 1 zoomed tight on the driver's seat. Victoria thought she was playing chess. I was building a documentary. Betty watched from across the street our silent comm system 2 curtain pulls for clear one for incoming. We didn't need a confession. We needed truth so undeniable even her allies would flee. The next impact wouldn't just be metal on metal, it would be a system crashing on camera. And when she finally pressed the gas, justice would be waiting on every frame. Saturday morning she arrived like a monarch inspecting her kingdom. Blazer, perfect. HOA badge polished, a thick folder tucked under one arm. "Daniel," she said, all sugar and superiority. "Your current violation total is $3,200. Payment is due by Monday morning, or we initiate foreclosure proceedings." Her tone was final, like she expected me to crumble. I didn't blink. Instead, I stepped out onto the porch, met her stare, and said, "You know what, Victoria? I think Monday morning's going to be very educational." Something in my voice made her pause. Just for a second. Then the smile returned. "I'm glad you're finally ready to be reasonable," she said, turning to leave. She thought she'd won, but she wasn't walking away from surrender. She was walking straight into her final act, and I'd already built the stage. Monday, 5:57 a.m. I stood at my bedroom window, coffee in hand, phone recording, every camera indicator flashing green. Betty was across the street, curtains parted 2 inches, her live stream already counting viewers. 12, 14, 22. Her caption. "Watch what happens when a bully hits steel." The street was still. No birds, no cars, no wind. Only the low hum of anticipation vibrating in my chest. The fortress mailbox stood gleaming in the golden light, untouched, unshaken. Camouflaged perfection regulation height, regulation shine, regulation, death trap. I checked the timestamp, 5:57:41. That SUV had never been late, and just as I took a slow breath, the rumble started. Low, deep, predator in motion. She was coming, and this time physics was ready to answer her authority. 5:58 a.m. Her black SUV appeared right on schedule. She slowed just enough to line up her shot like she always did, then accelerated. Full force, no hesitation. And this time, boom! The front end crumpled like paper hitting brick. Hood twisted. Headlights shattered. Steam hissed from the destroyed radiator. The Fortress mailbox didn't move an inch. Not a scratch, not a dent. Just standing there gleaming in the sunrise like justice in aluminum form. Airbags exploded inside her car. Fluids pooled beneath the wreckage rainbow slick on the asphalt. Neighbors peeked out from curtains, phones raised. Through her shattered windshield, Victoria stared stunned. Not at what she hit, but at what refused to break. She didn't just hit a mailbox. She hit everything she thought couldn't hit back. I stepped outside, still holding my phone, still recording. Each step deliberate, calm. Behind me, the Fortress mailbox stood like a statue of defiance. Victoria fumbled her door open, stumbling out airbag burns on her face, hair frazzled like static. You set me up," she screamed, pointing at the mailbox. Across the street, Betty's voice echoed from her live stream. "Ladies and gentlemen, the HOA just hit karma head-on. More neighbors appeared, bathrobes, slippers, phones in hand. They weren't hiding anymore, they were filming. Victoria spun in circles yelling, 'This is illegal, this is entrapment. Stop recording me.' But we weren't on her front lawn, we were on a public street, and every second was being captured from 5 different angles. This wasn't just a crash, it was a reckoning, and it was only just beginning." Victoria spun in place like a storm with no direction. "Stop recording. This is harassment. I'll sue every one of you." But no one stopped. One by one, neighbors stepped closer. Phones up, faces firm. People who once avoided eye contact were now holding their ground. "This is public property," someone said. "She's the one who weaponized the HOA." Derek, her once loyal sidekick, showed up halfway through the meltdown. He took one look at the destroyed SUV, the cameras, the witnesses, and quietly turned around. Victoria's voice cracked. Her hands trembled. She was losing the only thing she truly held control, and the street she ruled by fear was no longer afraid. Because today her badge didn't shine. It clinked like cheap metal, and every phone lens reflected back the same truth: her reign was over. That Friday, the community center overflowed. People who hadn't spoken in months filled every chair, every wall. Mothers with babies, veterans, retirees, and one by one they stood up. She fined us $200 for painting our mailbox the same blue as 3 others. She forced us to cut down a tree older than the HOA itself. She made our kids cry for laughing too loud. Betty stood at the front holding a thick binder, years of records. Photos, dates, names, fines, audio clips. This wasn't governance, she said, voice firm. It was a reign of fear. I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. The footage had already spoken louder than any testimony. When the vote came, there was no hesitation. 47 households, unanimous. Victoria Harlow was officially removed. Her badge dropped on the floor. No one picked it up. Within a week, her house had a for sale sign. No car in the driveway, no visitors, just silence. Former allies crossed the street to avoid her. The local grocery store banned her after she screamed at a cashier over conspiracies. Even Derek resigned from the HOA board via email. Victoria Harlow once feared and obeyed. Now walked her own sidewalk like a ghost. No more clipboards, no more commands. Just a woman out of control, out of friends, and out of time. Meanwhile, something new stirred in the neighborhood. a cautious peace. Porch lights came on again. People waved not out of obligation but relief. The HOA didn't collapse. It transformed. And Victoria. She didn't just lose a vote. She lost her throne, her kingdom, and the illusion of untouchability. The fortress didn't just stop her SUV, it ended her rule. A month later, Willowbend Lane looked alive again. The HOA, now led by President Betty Chambers, canceled every bogus fine Victoria ever issued. She set up real community projects, block parties, garden days, mediation tables. Kids played in yards again. Laughter replaced whispers. People knocked on doors, not to report violations, but to offer pie. My grandparents' memorial garden. We rebuilt it together. One neighbor brought roses, another donated a bench. Betty cried when she saw the stepping stones laid back in place, and the mailbox, people started calling it the fortress. Visitors asked to take pictures. Even kids tapped it like it was part of a legend. It wasn't just steel and bolts anymore. It was a statement. We remember. We resist. We rebuild. And in that quiet strength, our little street finally found its voice again. I still start most mornings the same way, coffee in hand, standing at the bedroom window. But now I watch kids ride bikes safely. Neighbors wave without fear. The garden blooms again, visited by people who remember the story. I never meant to become anything more than quiet. I just wanted peace. But peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from standing up when someone decides your dignity is optional. I think about my grandparents often, how they planted things not for show but for shade for future mornings just like this. The fortress mailbox still stands untouched, but it's no longer just protection. It's a reminder that legacies don't end when someone breaks what we love. They begin when we decide what won't break us, and that's something even HOA bylaws can't erase. 6 months later, a young family knocked on my door. They just moved into Victoria's old house. "Are you the guy who built that?" the dad asked, pointing at the mailbox. His 2 kids were already circling it, tapping the steel like it was Excalibur. I nodded. "They say you stood up to a monster in a pantsuit," he chuckled. The little boy looked up. "Can you teach us how to build one too, in case we ever need it?" I smiled. Because that's the thing about real strength. It doesn't come from concrete or steel. It comes from knowing when to say, enough. The mailbox wasn't just defense, it became inspiration, and with every person who asked the story, grew roots. Roots deep enough that no tyrant could ever dig them up again. Sometimes it's not the size of what hits you, but how deep your roots go. This story was never about a mailbox. It was about standing up quietly, patiently, but firmly when someone tries to tear down what matters most. My grandparents didn't teach me how to fight. They taught me how to build, how to protect beauty, how to stay grounded even when the wind howls. If you've ever felt pushed, silenced, or made small by someone hiding behind rules, they twist for power. I hope this story reminded you. You are not alone. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to move. If this story touched you even just a little, I'd love for you to tap that like button, share it with someone who needs it, or simply subscribe to be here for the next chapter, not for the algorithm. But because stories like this, they only live on, if we choose to remember them. Thanks for listening. And hey, take care of your garden. Someone else might need its shade tomorrow.